Good morning. Welcome to the Boise Unitarian Universalist Fellowship Worship Service. I'm Gwyn Reed, your celebrant for today, and I'm joined by Valora McCallum, our tech host, Rachel Murphy, and Nan Harms. And I also want to thank our musicians, music director Carrie Bastian and William Emerson Page, and also acknowledge the artistic contributions of Robert Franklin. Wherever you are, as you join us virtually for this service, you are welcome with us. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, whomever you love, whatever faiths you have known or religious practices you embody, if any, you are welcome with us. We take a moment to acknowledge that the land upon which we live and worship is the occupied lands of the Shoshone, Bannock, and Paiute peoples. To acknowledge their traditional territory is to recognize the longer history of this land, reaching before colonization and the imperial forces that shape our society. Let us consider the land's significance for the indigenous people who lived and continue to live upon this territory. The social justice plate partner for August is BOOP's Pay It Forward Fund. The Reverend Elizabeth Green Pay It Forward Fund, or PIF, P-I-F-F, was created approximately 13 years ago to address a need among our own BOOF community for short-term emergency financial assistance. The PIF funds are available to support BOOF members and friends through the generosity of those who donate. Over the years, funds have helped members and friends stay in their homes, pay for groceries, utilities, medical expenses, and other basic needs of living. And now I invite you to take a moment to settle in. Notice your breathing. Let us all take one deep breath together. We may not be with each other physically, but may that one deliberate and coordinated breath enhance our awareness of each other as Nan Harms reads our beloved opening poem, Second Person Intimate by Reverend Kendall Gibbons.
Thou art the song of my heart in the morning. Thou art the dawn of truth in my soul. Thou art the dew of the roses adorning. Thou art the woven whole. Thine is the grace to be steadfast in danger. Thine is the peace that none can destroy. Thine is the face of the need-riven stranger. Thine are the wings of joy. Thou art the deep, to the deep in me calling. Thou art a lamp that lights where I tread. Thy way is steep, past the peril of falling. Thou art my daily bread. Thine be the praise of my spirit uplifted. Thou art the sea to each flowing stream. Thine be the days that are gathered and sifted. Thou art the deathless dream.
I just want to mention that for those of you who live in Idaho and other states where cannabis has not yet been legalized, the Boise Unitarian Universalist Fellowship is in no way advocating rolling another joint. While it is impossible to know exactly how another feels, it is possible to be sensitive to another person's feelings and experiences. Now more than ever, we need to be considerate of people who are struggling to live out their lives built on the meanings they have made. We need to participate and act on our own experiences and the meaning we receive. It can alter the way we live out our lives. Each week, we light our flaming chalice, a symbol of our free faith, a beacon of hope, love, and justice. We join in this lighting in solidarity and community with hundreds of other Unitarian Universalists lighting chalices today in homes and in virtual worship services, reminding us that we are connected to one another and to a larger community of faith and love. If you have a chalice nearby, we invite you to light it with us. And if you are able, hold it up to your camera and switch to gallery view to see all the chalices being lit today. Then you're invited to share in the chat the chalice is lit on Garrett Street or whatever street you live on. And there's no rush. Let's take a moment for the lighting, the sharing, the viewing. Savor the familiar and new names and places shared in the chat. Appreciate the others among us who are lighting their chalice. And since this service is occurring in virtual space, it is more than fine to light a virtual chalice. The chalice is lit on Balsam Street. Beautiful. You can still continue to enter things in the chat. This country was founded upon lofty ideals, promises of justice and equality for all, and inalienable rights. But those rights and promises failed to reach far too many. And here we are finally reckoning with hard truths about what it means to be an American. As we have collectively lit our chalices, let us remember together the dream of America that may yet be possible as we experience this call to worship by Reverend Cecil Williams. We come together this morning in acknowledgement of our need of one another. Some of us need to be heard but have no one who will really listen. Some of us need to be loved, and some of us need to love.
Some of us want to change, but it's too painful or difficult. Some of us are lonely, but afraid to tell anyone.
Some of us want to just be ourselves, but we're afraid we won't be accepted as we are.
Some of us want to make the world a better place, but feel weighed down by a sense of futility.
Some of us don't even know what we need, but hope to find out here.
We come together, sometimes in fear, sometimes in trust, sometimes in sorrow and pain, sometimes in joy.
But always in hope and faith that we can help and strengthen each other in our quest for healing.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rachel Murphy, and I am here today for our Time for All Ages in place of our Religious Exploration Coordinator, Jem Emerson Page. She is enjoying some well-deserved time off and celebrating a family wedding. We are very grateful to her for preparing this story and some questions for us all to ponder afterwards. I'd like to invite our children now to come a little closer to your screens so you can see the book better. And I also invite everyone to listen and to think about the questions that are raised. This morning, we are talking about some of the things we mean when we say Black Lives Matter. What do you know about why we say Black Lives Matter? When we say Black Lives Matter, we are making a promise. We promise to take action against the behaviors and policies that harm Black people. That can mean a lot of different things, and there is room for everyone to take different types of actions. I know this is a really big project, and it's very important, and there are things that kids can do as well as adults. Sometimes, though, we can get kind of lost in all of the different ways that we might take part. So it helps to have a foundation on which we can build our ideas. Our story this morning can help us build this foundation. It is called Anti-Racist Baby, and it was written by Ibram X. Kendi and illustrated by Ashley Lukashevsky. Have you ever heard the word anti-racist before? What do you think that might mean? Why don't we learn with this story? So here we are on the first page. Anti-racist baby is bred, not born. Anti-racist baby is raised to make society transform. Do you see the protest signs there? Babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There's no neutrality. Take these 9 steps to make equity a reality. Step 1, open your eyes to all skin colors. Anti-racist baby learns all the colors, not because race is true. If you claim to be colorblind, you deny what is right in front of you. Step 2, use your words to talk about race. No one will see racism if we only stay silent. If we don't name racism, it won't stop being so violent. Do you see what's reflected in the binoculars? Step 3, point at policies as the problem, not people. Some people get more, while others get less, because policies don't always grant equal access. Step 4, shout, "There's nothing wrong with the people." Even though all races are not treated the same, we are all human, anti-racist baby can proclaim. Step 5, celebrate all our differences. Anti-racist baby doesn't see certain groups as better or worse. Anti-racist baby loves a world that's truly diverse. Step 6, knock down the stack of cultural blocks. Anti-racist baby appreciates how groups speak, dance, and create as they choose. Anti-racist baby welcomes all groups, voicing their unique views. Step 7, confess when being racist. Nothing disrupts racism more than when we confess the racist ideas that we sometimes express. Everyone might stumble, but we can catch ourselves. Step 8, grow to be an anti-racist. Anti-racist baby is always learning, changing, and growing. Anti-racist baby stays curious about all people and isn't all knowing. Step 9, believe we shall overcome racism. Anti-racist baby is filled with the power to transcend, my friend, and doesn't judge a book by its cover, but reads until the end. Now let's talk about some questions to ponder, and you can think about these with your caregivers or amongst yourselves, and caregivers as well, and those who are no longer immediately caring for someone younger. You can think about these questions too. Did you learn any new ideas from this story? There were some very big ideas in it. How do you understand your own identity, where you're from, and how you are in the world? Anti-racists are raised, our story says. We are shaped by what our community and family show and tell us about the world and what race means. How do we talk to one another in our booth community about race? Can you name some ways that racism works in your everyday life? Now, the children are not going off to their separate spaces today. You are invited to stay with us and remain in the service. And as you listen to the rest of the service, I can give you some ideas for things that you might also work on if you have some creative juices running through your fingers. Can you draw or craft something that celebrates all skin colors and the diversity of humanity? Can you name something that you've learned about racism? And you can do this out loud, or you could write something down. Can you create your own sign that says Black Lives Matter that you could display? Thank you for listening.
Each week, we take up a collection to support this fellowship and the ministries to which we give our attention. We support ministries that encourage our own liberation from fears and outworn prejudices. We support ministries that liberate us collectively from assumptions based on a vision too narrow. And instead, we take up a vision that invites us to stretch our comfort zone, widen our circle, and practice radical welcome and inclusion. This morning, let us give for our future. We are accepting donations online. We invite you to go to our website, boiseuu.org, where you will see the Give button. It's highlighted on this slide with a nice big heart around it. With your generous gifts, we will support our justice outreach. This month, our attention is focused on our fellowship's own Pay It Forward Fund. 25% of our Sunday offering this morning will go to PIF. If you would like to donate 100% of your offering to PIF, put the amount into the special contribution category and write Plate Partner or PIFF in the blank field next to the amount. We thank you for your generosity. The offering will now be received. Valora, we're not hearing sound. We're going to try to cue this offertory up again.
Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? So rocky was my road. Ain't you got a ride? So dangerous was the journey. Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? All of my sorrow, ain't you got a ride? Gonna soon be over. Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Gonna tell all my brothers, ain't you got a ride? Gonna tell all my sisters, ain't you got a ride? Gonna tell it to the world, ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? I know we're tired. Ain't you got a ride? And I know we're weary. Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Our lives will be sweeter. Ain't you got a ride? So sweet someday. Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Well, ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride? Ain't you got a ride to the tree of life? Ain't you got a ride?
Now please welcome Nan Harms for the sermon.
How do you determine the value of a life? What is the inherent worth and dignity of every person? Are there differences? All our lives we have questions, and all our lives we look for answers. When I was in my early years with my family growing up in Wendell, Idaho, I remember watching television on a black and white set as we ate dinner. I witnessed the race riots in the early 60s and increased news coverage of the Vietnam War. I watched young men traipsing through the wilds of Vietnam, blacks and whites and Vietnamese. At the same time, I watched as hundreds of young Black men and women were demonstrating on the streets of Birmingham, Alabama, Chicago, Watts in Los Angeles, New York City, Detroit, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. Sheriffs turned fire hoses on them. Dogs barked and bit and lunged on their leashes. Tear gas was used to control the crowds. In Watts, the Los Angeles Police Department called in the California National Guard to help restore order. Before the uprising was over, more than 13,000 guardsmen were involved. When we were living in Wendell, my and my sister's best friend's family was Hispanic. We played in each other's homes, ate meals with each other's families. I remember watching Fascinated by Mrs. Rodriguez making handmade tortillas as she tossed them between her hands and turned them into food we ate. I listened to my parents who discussed the events we were watching on TV. My parents were vocal about their support of politicians and their opinions of the news reports. I had a recurring nightmare that I struggled with throughout my childhood into my teen years. I'd wake up screaming. In the dream, my family were all crucified and burned. It wasn't until I mentioned the dream to my father many years later that he explained the basis for it. Father explained that I had witnessed intolerance in Wendell. When I was not quite 4 years old, we had a professor in our home from the College of Idaho. My parents brought him to Wendell to speak to the PTA. We had him to dinner before the meeting. Later that night, I woke up to a commotion. I remember now peeking around my mother's nightgown as I was a spectator on that night, oh so long ago. We had a cross burned on our lawn. The professor was from India. When we moved to Boise in 1966, father and mother joined the NAACP. They met at the YWCA, the same as our church. I often went to meetings with them. I remember them planning a protest march at night that would go from BSU up Capitol Boulevard, over the Boise River to the State House. We carried candles. I marched with them, wondering when were the hoses and dogs going to be turned on us. It wasn't long after we moved to Boise that my parents had me bused from my school to another to even out attendance. I was hearing of so many other children who were being bused on the news, I didn't think anything about it. It seemed normal to me. But I was curious as to how I would be welcomed to the new school. Over the years, we've often witnessed inequality on the news. The mistreatment and killing of young Black men by law enforcement and the disparity with similar instances involving white youths don't make sense to me. We watch as students, men, women, and children walk in demonstration of yet another life taken, George Floyd, snuffed out by police. A horrific video witnessing the extinguishing of Floyd's life on the pavement was the impetus for the protests that have taken place across our nation and the world. A policeman terminated George Floyd's life by kneeling on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. For me, it looked like the policeman was lording over him as an overseer, not giving a care over what he was doing to this Black man, his hand nonchalantly in his pocket. Anguish caused by the uncalled for deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, David McAtee, Rayshard Brooks, Tatiana Jefferson, Aura Rosser, and countless others have brought people of all colors together. This is quite different from the civil rights demonstrations in the early 60s. When I was an adolescent in this church, I remember a young interracial couple in the early 20s that attended while we were still meeting at the YW. She was white and a student at BSU, and he was Black and worked for the Job Corps in Marsing. I remember them telling of one time when he was going to return by bus after a weekend in Boise to Marsing with other men of color from Job Corps. A group of them were approaching the bus when a band of white men advanced on them with bike chains and bats and pipes. The bus driver closed the doors to the bus to protect those who had already boarded and to keep the melee outside. Those on the street were beaten severely. If memory serves, this took place not far from the police station that used to be downtown on 6th Street. No one was charged in the brawl that took place. I ask again, by what do we measure the worth of a life? How is this valuation system, which we call what the market will bear, that determines the value of one's time used to maintain the status quo? What is the role of racism in this valuation system? In what way is white supremacy in cahoots with capitalism? And how is the justice system used to reinforce the system of valuation? Or can we measure a life by the thousands who marched in protest across our nation, coast to coast, to protest the brutality of the policemen who took part in the inhumane treatment of George Floyd while he was in their custody? The policemen were arrested and charged with murder, but what will come of it? While the trial of the officers is a way off, this time the response of officials feels different. Will there be an outcome of finding them guilty? We had an eerily similar response from this president, who called on National Guardsmen and active duty troops of the armed forces to beef up security against those who protested. President Dwight D. Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy each sent in National Guard troops to protect Black students who are part of integrating schools. Contrast this with President Trump sending in troops to quail and control the protesters who are mostly peaceful. At what other time has a president had troops displace protesters so he could have a photo op in front of a church? And now he is sending federal troops of unknown origin. What we were witnessing on the street of Portland and other cities was brutal. People were being abducted off the streets by unidentified federal agents into unmarked vehicles and detained without due process. Another hallmark showing disparity is the contrast between the protesters of today and the police interactions. The unarmed people who are protesting Black Lives Matter in many cities have been literally pushed by police and National Guardsmen in riot gear, as well as have pepper spray, tear gas, and rubber bullets turned on them. Contrast that to the white nationalists who have protested while being armed to the teeth, who are pushing back against the BLM activists or against the pandemic measures by state officials, have been observed by the police with little interaction or seeming concern. Many communities are now calling for police departments to be defunded. Minneapolis City Council voted for that. What is wrong with police and their departments? Why is there such friction between the Black community and the police? The setup of a white and Black America began a long time ago. Many of the divides in our American culture can be drawn to slavery. The holidays we honor, the monuments that were made, the names of schools can be traced to the inhumane, immoral system. Even the innocuous verbiage of master bedroom has its roots in slavery. The birth and development of the American police can be traced to a multitude of historical, legal, and political economic conditions. The institution of slavery and the control of minorities, however, were two of the more formidable historic features of American society shaping early policing. Slave patrols and night watches, which later became modern police departments, were both designed to control the behaviors of minorities. These are unprincipled times. People live for themselves, huddled according to self-interest, concerned for their security. The risks are greater than they were in Thoreau's time. I would not gladly spend a night in one of Los Angeles' jails. Think then about Martin Luther King, who spent more than one night in the Birmingham jail, who knew that his life was always under threat, who feared for his family, and still, despite all that, held true to his conscience. With his faith community behind him and the conviction that a justice would come down on his side, he took Thoreau's example and wrote it large for the whole world to see. One honest man found another. Many white people have just recognized their own complicity in America's racist systems and are looking to fix that. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's a little bit like saying, I want to be a sheik tomorrow, says author Robin DiAngelo. This is going to be a process. DiAngelo is the author of White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. The book came out in 2018 and is back on the bestseller list as streets filled with protesters calling for an end to police violence against Black people. The status quo in the United States is racism, DiAngelo says, and it is comfortable for me as a white person to live in a racist society. To sustain the momentum of these protests, DiAngelo says, it must become uncomfortable for white people to continue to benefit from racist systems. In an NPR interview, DiAngelo addressed what we often call white privilege. This work will be lifelong, really thinking deeply about what it means to be white, how your race shapes your life. We live in a society that turns race over to people of color. They have a race. We're just people. And so we see ourselves as outside of race. And that's problematic for many reasons. But there's so much potentially rich insight that we can gain from deeply reflecting on our own racial experiences. When I hear the president talk about preserving and protecting democracy, I think, yes, you want to preserve democracy by embalming it with formaldehyde in an airtight racist container. When I was living and working in Houston, Texas in the early 80s, I remember the Juneteenth celebrations. It was a state holiday. I wondered at the time why it wasn't a national holiday. After all, it was something that marked our country's history, like the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence. But a few years later, Martin Luther King's birthday was established. Today, the King holiday serves multiple purposes. It honors the total legacy of King, focuses on the issue of civil rights, highlights the use of nonviolence to promote change, and calls people into public service. I guess we might think that one Black holiday is enough, or rather that African Americans should be satisfied with that. They got a month for recognizing African American accomplishments and historical figures. But as Cherie Buckner Webb said, it's the shortest month of the year. From time to time on a journey, you have to stop to check the map, to see where you are, and to set the compass for the next steps. What is next for us? We use pledge to affirm and promote 7 principles. We have the first principle, respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We have the second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We have the 7th principle, the interdependent web of all existence. But our association and many of our congregations were caught flat-footed, not honoring those principles. So the 8th principle was developed. As a congregation, Booth adopted the 8th principle last fall. We pledged to affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. If we affirm and promote these principles, if we talk about what they mean to us and how we practice them in our lives, if we vote in elections guided by them, if we help our children understand them, If our credit card statements and church budgets reflect these principles, then we are indeed peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers. I would like to provide an excerpt from a sermon by UU minister Reverend Frank Hall, who said this nation is separated by a Teflon curtain. Years ago, there was a legal wall of separation, legal barriers of segregation. Those walls of law have been removed, most of them. Yet there remains a frustratingly difficult, somewhat diaphanous curtain between us. Like Teflon, it seems impervious to meaningful efforts to grab hold and tear it aside. It is difficult to grasp. It is difficult to see. It is difficult to identify. It seems to blow with the winds, so that sometimes it seems to have shifted away, but then it blows back again to block our efforts to build a true multicultural, anti-racist society. Frank Hall continues. During the civil rights era, Unitarian Universalist congregations across the nation took an active role in tearing down the walls, both of legal segregation and of overt racism. But more recently, we haven't known what to do. D'Angelo says, take out a piece of paper and jot down your answer to why you don't know what to do or how to get started. And there will be your map. Everything you write on that piece of paper can be addressed. None of it will be quick or easy, but begin with that list. Here we are in 2020, and we're finding that our first principle, respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person, is the hardest to live up to. We are learning how to value all life. We cannot, as a congregation, leap forward without doing the work of becoming anti-racist. There are no shortcuts. Author Robin DiAngelo says the question white people should be asking themselves is not, have I been shaped by race, but how have I been shaped by race? All right. Can you say, it was inevitable that I was socialized into this system? It's inevitable that I will have blind spots. And so I'm going to focus my energy on how I've been shaped by the system, but not if. What can Unitarian Universalists do with these new efforts by today's protesters? Again, we are never going to understand this if we don't listen to Black, Indigenous, and other peoples of color. So start reading what they're writing, listening to their videos, attending their talks, and educating yourself. The Reverend Dr. Natalie Fenimore wrote in a sermon titled, I am yearning for the Unitarian Universalism that does not yet exist. Shirley Chisholm was asked why she, a Black woman, was running for president. You don't have a chance. Why are you doing that? And she said, because I'm in love with the America that does not yet exist. And that's how Unitarian Universalism is also. I'm in love with the America that does not yet exist. And that's how Unitarian Universalism is also. I'm in love with the Unitarian Universalism that does not yet exist. But I have to hold both the love for that thing and the love for the reality. It does not yet exist. It will probably not exist in my lifetime. You probably don't think it will in my children, but I can't deny my love for it. You know, wanting to be there in that struggle, that's why I'm fighting. So how do we measure a life? What are we fighting for? I'm a member of this church because this is where I can come to be awakened to the possibilities of a life well lived. I give to this church because we come here to carry forward hope and promise that as we would be one caring community, so too would all humankind. I belong to this church because I believe we do this as a celebration of the great mystery of our life, the mystery that tells us that despite our many different paths, we know we walk together as one common community, searching, sometimes struggling, to find meaning in the life that is ours to live today. Amen to uprising. May our religion grow and learn and change. May it be so.
Come by here, my Lord. Come by here. Come by here, my Lord. Come by here. Come by here, my Lord. Come by here. Oh, Lord, come by here. 'Cause we are crying, Lord, come by here. We are crying, my Lord, please come by here. We are crying, my Lord, come by here. Oh, Lord, come by here. For our children, Lord, come by here. For our children, my Lord, come by here. For our children, my Lord, come by here. Oh, Lord, come by here.
We create a spiritual, human-centered, life-centered, life-giving hope as a community, nurturing the bonds of our connection. We may not know where we are going nor how to get there, but we are going together. This is the time to give and receive the joys and sorrows of this community. I have one joy and one sorrow that we've received already from members of our community. First, the joy. Aaron Logan and Bob Smith share that their daughter, Colleen Smith, gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Colleen and her partner welcome Tamarack, Virginia. Aaron and Bob are ecstatic to add grandparents to their list of roles. And we hold with tenderness our beloved Jeanette Ross, whose youngest brother died on Tuesday. You may participate in this time of sharing by typing your own joys and sorrows into the chat box while we listen and receive the healing balm of music. I invite you to place your hand on your heart as you read to yourselves our collective joys and sorrows as they appear in the chat.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah yeah, 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 oh yeah yeah. We are going, within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, 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 oh yeah, yeah.
Please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation with these words from Reverend Michael McGee. Source of love, in our world, we are one human family gathered in one house of faith with one spirit of peace and joy. But we have too often ignored our unity. We have built a wall between the nations, a wall between the rich and poor, a wall between the strong and weak, a wall between the races, a wall between those of different sexual orientations, a wall between the faiths, a wall between people like us and those who are not like us. May we have a vision of one world community, one world of liberty, peace, and justice, one world of dialogue and insight between all peoples, one world of joyful diversity, one world of compassion and service. May we dismantle the walls of division and live as one family in the household of faith. Let us now open our minds and hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain and the soft, gentle coming of love. This reading is from 2018's Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly Ware Lecture, given by Brittany Packnett. You can't be prejudiced, racist, sexist, or homophobic. After all, you belong to this faith. You don't carry pitchforks and march with the Charlottesville gang. You don't vote for Trump, and you started the Women's March chapter in your city.
You are a good person with good intentions. You love everyone, and your tax returns prove it. But I challenge you, I charge you, if here is where you're tuned out, this is precisely and exactly the time to tune in.
Do you love people of color, or do you tolerate us as long as we aren't too disruptive to your agenda?
Do you love LGBTQ people, or do you only love the cis white male ones and forget the L, the B, the T, and the Q, especially the ones of color in your fight?
Do you reflect the culture of your congregation in your leadership, or do you check boxes and fill quotas?
You do not have to be white supremacist to benefit from white supremacy any more than you have to be misogynist to still benefit from the patriarchy, or a homophobe to still benefit from straight privilege.
It is not enough just to not be racist. We must expect ourselves to be actively anti-racist.
It is not enough to not be sexist. We must expect ourselves to be intentionally and consistently disruptive of gender discrimination.
It is not enough to not be a transphobic. We must expect ourselves to be obsessed with supporting the achievement of justice for trans people across the globe as we are with our own.
Before our closing song, I want to invite us all to take another collective breath together. We share in this song together in solidarity with communities of color to center the voices on the margins, in recognition that our journey toward racial justice, toward dismantling white supremacy, toward spiritual wholeness must continue. And that journey can also be filled with joy, with song, and most of all, with that deep neighbor love that is the core of our UU theology. You will hear Amy Carol Webb's lyrics sung by the group Peaceful Uprising. The words of the chorus will show in the slides, and I invite you to sing along.
I will stand with you. Will you stand with me? And we will be the change that we hope to see. In the name of love, in the name of peace, will you stand with me? When injustice raises up its fist and fights to stop us in our tracks, we will rise, and as one resist, no fear nor sorrow can turn us back. I will stand with you. Will you stand with me? And we will be the change that we hope to see. In the name of love, in the name of peace, will you stand with me? When pain and hatred churn up angry noise and fight to drown out our freedom song, we will rise in one joyful voice, loud and clear and ever strong. I will stand with you. Will you stand with me? And we will be the change that we hope to see. In the name of love, in the name of peace, will you stand with me? When broken hearts come knocking on our doors, lost and hungry and so alone, we will reach as we have reached before, for there is no stranger in this our home. I will stand with you. Will you stand with me? And we will be the change that we hope to see. In the name of love, in the name of peace, will you stand with me? I will stand with you. Will you stand with me? And we will be the change that we hope to see. In the name of love, in the name of peace, will you stand with me? In the name of love, in the name of peace, will you stand with me?
All right. Our closing blessing is A Time for Prayer by Sidney K. Wilde and Dennis Daniel. Prayer for those of the right, for projecting evil on those who appear different. We ask forgiveness. For ignoring the pain which our economic policies inflict on others. We ask forgiveness. For ignoring the rights of innocent people in the name of security. We ask forgiveness. For resorting to war as a path to power and control. We ask forgiveness. For allowing our fears to overcome our most fundamental values as Americans. We ask forgiveness. Prayer for those of the left. For blaming our leaders for the actions of others, we ask forgiveness. For our oversimplification of the complexities of political realities, we ask forgiveness. For our resistance to any kind of check on our freedoms as a cost of security, we ask forgiveness. For our failure to recognize the existence of evil as an active principle in human endeavors, we ask forgiveness. For our failure to speak out in the face of public opinion, we ask forgiveness. Forgive us all sins. Amen. May we be open to possibility and our own willingness to be fully present in this world. Blessed are we all. We will have a postlude before breaking into our breakout groups. This is the Detroit Youth Choir singing Glory.